Hello, this is Progressive Short Takes, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. What I want to talk about in this particular short take is some reactions from Venezuela and from some of the reporters who have been covering Venezuelan events to the events that occurred here on January 6th. So I will share the screen with you for this. There was an article that appeared in Common Dreams about it. The article was written by Kenny Stansel on January 6th, so 4 days ago. I thought it was too good to pass up. After right-wing coup effort in D.C., Venezuela offers sympathy for U.S. suffering, what, quote, it has generated, unquote, elsewhere. And there's a picture of Juan Guaido, who is self-proclaimed acting president of Venezuela. He was climbing a railing in an attempt to reach the National Assembly building in Caracas on January 5th, 2020, and the National Guard was attempting to prevent him from reaching the building. And of course, there is the man who occupied Nancy Pelosi's office, put his feet up on the desk, and I guess did a little ransacking of the office. After he stormed the grounds of the U.S. Capitol building, or was among a crowd storming the grounds of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. While Democrat and Republican lawmakers, political pundits, and angered U.S. citizens of all stripes rightly condemned Wednesday's violent coup attempt by a pro-Trump mob in the nation's capital, at least one foreign government offered its sympathy for the assault, while also pointing out that U.S.-backed efforts to subvert the democracy abroad are all too common. In the wake of the day's deadly mayhem at the U.S. Capitol building, the Venezuelan government issued a public statement expressing concern with the acts of violence that are taking place in the city of Washington, D.C., unquote. And quote again, Venezuela condemns the political polarization and the spiral of violence that only reflects the deep crisis that the political and social system of the United States is currently going through. With this unfortunate episode, the United States is suffering the same thing that it has generated in other countries with its policies of aggression. Well, I have to say that the whole of that statement by Venezuela was justified, wasn't it? Wasn't it? That is what has been going on. With respect to Venezuela, we've been supporting coups there for some time. And at Telesur, its English edition, stated the Bolivarian government by Venezuela has condemned the acts of violence that took place in Washington, D.C., and reminds that U.S. foreign policy consistently promotes these policies of aggression against legitimate democratic process worldwide. And yes, we do. We frequently do that. Okay. And we have to stop. By all accounts, from foreign observers, the elections, in Venezuela are free and fair. Now, we don't have international observers who come here to evaluate our elections. I don't know whether they would evaluate them as free, okay, and fair. Okay, it looks like we had a pretty good election, okay, at least the one for the presidency and for the House and Senate this time around in 2020. But there were many things that were pretty freaky and suspicious about the primary election, okay, in the Democratic Party in the same year. Great discrepancies between the exit polling and the final counts, which came out of the primary. Anyway, Juan Guaido, Venezuela's right-wing opposition figure who in 2019 oversaw a failed U.S.-backed coup attempt after the re-election of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, became a flashpoint for commentators, eager to shed light on the hypocrisy of U.S. lawmakers from both major parties who gave Guaido a standing ovation when the self-anointed leader, I think I'd more accurately call him the self-appointed leader, but okay, the self-anointed leader was erroneously described by President Donald Trump during his 2020 State of the Union address as the, quote, true and legitimate president, okay, of Venezuela, unquote. In whose fantasy land is a person who in the last election, okay, by Venezuela, got literally no votes, the true and legitimate president of that country. Anyway, alluding to a viral photo of a Trump supporter triumphantly raising his fist in the U.S. Senate chamber during Wednesday's anti-democratic insurrection by journalist Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone News said, quote, imagine if a foreign power were to recognize this guy as president, and you'll know how Venezuelans feel, unquote. Alex Rubinstein tweeted, save this photo for your, quote, how it started, how it's going, unquote, takes a week from now. There's the photo of the gentleman raising his fist where the president of the Senate often sits. Anya Parentpill from the Gray Zone noted that the Maduro opponent, Carlos Vecchio, was welcomed in D.C. as Juan Guaido's ambassador, not long after, quote, encouraging violence and attacks on government buildings in Venezuela. The main difference between the Venezuelan opposition that has tried to violently overthrow the president, okay, of Venezuela since he was reelected, and the so-called Stop the Steal rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday in an attempt to strip Joe Biden of his legitimate victory, is that the corporate media, quote, recognizes the danger in these actions when they're taking place in their own capital. Okay, and Anya tweets, okay, a Venezuelan friend who was following Stop the Steal, hashtag Stop the Steal protests, just said to me, demonstrators violently storming the Capitol are, quote, the same as the opposition in by Venezuela. Yes, they are right-wing fascists in Venezuela, too. And they are right-wing fascists here, of course. So, I think that's really all I had to say about this. There are some photos here, okay, that are interesting. one such photo. Those are photos from Washington with Nancy Pelosi and Debbie Wasserman Schultz posing for photos with some of the Venezuelans who are supporting, I think the dark-haired man in the photo shaking hands with Nancy Pelosi is Carlos Vecchio. He, of course, was the guy who was representing the right-wing coupers in Venezuela. There were our leaders standing with them and supporting them. And there is Donna Shalala, who must be one of the biggest hypocrites in the whole United States. I wasn't crying over her losing, her re-election campaign to Congress. There she was with Nancy Pelosi and with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I'm not sure who the two other folks are. But there's Juan Guaido again, trying to climb the fence to get into the National Assembly building. And there are Trump's people trying to climb the wall in order to get into the U.S. Capitol. That's just about 1 year apart. So, I guess that's all I have to say, at this point. I think the hypocrisy was too rich to ignore here, and the Schadenfreude, as well. So thank you very much for coming. If you're here right now, I hope you liked this short take. It is a relatively short take, and I'll be back soon with another one.